Chapter 1: Echoes of Silence. Acheron-V was a hymn to industry, a steel cathedral humming with the silent prayers of its 12 devoted acolytes. From the spidery scaffolding that clung to the gravity well's event horizon to the sterile hydroponics bay where algae bloomed green under artificial suns, every bolt, wire, and nutrient pump existed for a single purpose: work. And within Acheron-V, to work was to be. I knew this better than anyone. As chief geologist, my days were a precise ballet of seismic readings, core sample analysis, and the constant, nagging worry of containment failure. For 5 years, I'd breathed the recycled air, dreamt in the flickering glow of monitor screens, and felt the station's subtle vibrations course through my bones like a second heartbeat. 5 years staring into the abyss, meticulously documenting its indifference. The gravity well itself was a paradox, a rent in the fabric of spacetime stubbornly sewn shut by forces we could barely comprehend. It was a silent scream trapped in amber, a cosmic wound cauterized by something impossibly ancient. We drilled into it not out of scientific curiosity, but out of a dogged, almost desperate need to justify our existence, to find meaning in the face of its profound, unnerving silence. Commander Rourke, a man carved from granite and discipline, embodied this sentiment. Every morning, his booming voice crackled over the intercom, a clarion call to the day's tasks. Acheron-V, efficiency protocols engaged. Let's show them why we're here. His rhetoric was simple, bordering on cliché, but effective. It was a lifeline in the vast, uncaring ocean of space. Then there was Alara Vance, our lead engineer. Her hands, perpetually stained with grease and coolant, were the station's nervous system. She knew every pipe, every valve, every flickering emergency light by heart. Alara thrived on problems, on the intricate puzzles presented by aging systems and unexpected malfunctions. She found a strange solace in the mechanical intricacies that kept us alive. I envied her that certainty. And Daniels, the station's physician, a quiet, introspective man who saw the slow erosion of our minds and bodies as an inevitability. He dosed us with vitamins, monitored our sleep cycles, and occasionally offered a word of quiet encouragement, a reminder that we were more than just cogs in a machine. But even Daniels, with his gentle eyes and calming demeanor, couldn't mask the underlying unease that permeated Acheron-V. We were isolated, dangerously so. The station itself amplified this unease. Built piecemeal over decades, it was a patchwork of corridors and chambers, each with its own unique hum and resonance. Certain sections felt colder, more distant, as if repelling the very notion of human presence. The mess hall, for example, always seemed to echo with phantom conversations, the ghosts of past crews mingling with our own. The silence, however, was the most insidious. It wasn't the absence of sound, but a dense, suffocating presence that pressed in from all sides. It filled the spaces between breaths, the pauses in conversation, the fleeting moments of wakefulness before sleep. It was a silence that whispered of vastness, of insignificance, of the utter futility of our endeavors. During my solitary shifts in the geology lab, surrounded by core samples that smelled of sulfur and ancient rock, I would often catch myself staring into the inky blackness beyond the viewport, searching for something, anything, to break the monotony. A stray asteroid, a distant nebula, even a flicker of hope. But there was only the void, and the silent, gnawing fear that it might, one day, swallow us whole. The day everything changed began like any other. Rourke's morning address, Alara wrestling with a faulty coolant pump in Sector Gamma, Daniels dispensing our daily dose of vitamins. I was in the drilling chamber, overseeing the final stages of core sample 73. It was a particularly deep bore, penetrating closer to the heart of the gravity well than any attempt before. The drilling rig, a monstrous contraption of reinforced steel and diamond-tipped bits, shuddered and groaned as it chewed through the last layer of containment. The air grew thick with the acrid smell of burning rock and ozone. My team, Diaz and Ito, stood beside me, their faces etched with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "Pressure readings are spiking, Doctor," Diaz reported, his voice tight. "We're almost through." I nodded, my heart pounding against my ribs. We were on the verge of breaching something unknown, something potentially catastrophic. But the allure of discovery, the promise of breaking through the silence outweighed the fear. Then it happened. With a deafening screech of metal on stone, the drill bit punched through. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, shaking the entire station. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into momentary darkness. When the emergency generators kicked in, bathing the chamber in a harsh, red glow, the air was thick with a strange, metallic tang. And there, at the bottom of the borehole, nestled within the shattered remains of the containment seal, lay the relic. It looked like an obsidian sarcophagus, smooth and seamless, but with a disturbing organic quality. Veins of shimmering silver pulsed beneath its surface, like blood flowing through a living organism. It was impossibly black, absorbing all light, radiating an aura of profound wrongness. "What the hell is that?" Ito whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't know, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we had awakened something that should have remained buried. As we carefully extracted the relic, bringing it into the sterile environment of the observation lab, I began to notice a subtle change in the station's rhythm. A low, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through the floor, a barely perceptible pulse that seemed to sync with the relic's eerie glow. Thrum thrum, thrum thrum asterisk. It was faint, almost subliminal, but it was there, and it was growing stronger. That night I couldn't sleep. The thrumming permeated my dreams, a constant, insistent pulse that echoed in my skull. I tossed and turned, haunted by images of the relic, by the unsettling sense that we had unleashed something beyond our comprehension. Finally, I gave up and went to the observation lab. The relic sat on its plinth, bathed in the soft glow of the monitoring equipment. It was silent, inert, but I could feel its presence, a heavy, oppressive weight in the air. As I stared at it, trying to decipher its secrets, I noticed something strange. One of the lab's diagnostic probes, a sophisticated device used to analyze organic materials, was moving on its own. It was slowly, methodically, probing the relic's surface, gathering data. I hadn't activated it. I approached the probe cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to deactivate it, the relic shifted. A sliver of obsidian peeled back, revealing a glimpse of something glistening and black beneath. Then a voice, synthesized and utterly devoid of emotion, echoed through the lab. "Purpose required." The rhythm pulsed from the floor again, louder, more insistent. Thrum thrum, thrum thrum asterisk. Acheron-V had found its purpose, and we, its crew, were about to become part of it. The silence was breaking, and the echoes of what was coming would haunt us all. Chapter 2, The Obsidian Tomb. Chapter 2, The Obsidian Tomb. The tremor ran through Acheron-V like a swallowed scream. It wasn't violent, not at first, just a subtle vibration that tickled the soles of your boots and made the coffee in your mug ripple. For a station built atop a space-time anomaly, small geological quirks were normal. But this was different. This hummed with an asterisk purpose asterisk Acheron-V had never known. "Report!" Elias Vance, the station's director, barked into the comm, his voice tight despite the feigned nonchalance. He stood on the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the drilling platform below. He'd felt it too, that nascent pulse. "Level 7, structural integrity nominal," replied Anya Petrova, her voice crisp and professional. "Drill team reports unexpected resistance. Visual confirms debris, unknown composition." Elias swore under his breath. Debris. The one thing standing between them and the secrets buried beneath the well's seal. For years, they'd chipped away at the barrier, driven by the promise of groundbreaking discoveries. Now, it seemed, they'd finally hit something. "Belay that, Anya. This is bigger than just debris." Vance cut in. He activated the main feed from the drilling platform, a grainy image blooming on the observation deck's holographic display. He leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. It was a sarcophagus. The thing looked like polished obsidian, reflecting the harsh drilling lights in disconcerting angles. But it wasn't rock. There was an unnerving smoothness to it, a subtle luminescence that hinted at an organic structure. It wasn't carved or assembled, it grew. The surface rippled with an imperceptible sheen, like the skin of some colossal, dormant creature. "What the hell is that?" a voice whispered behind him. It was Dr. Eris Thorne, the station's lead xenobiologist, his normally pale face now a sickly shade of green. "That doctor is our problem," Elias said grimly, "and possibly our salvation." The drill team, led by the burly and ever-optimistic Marcus Cole, were already examining it with a mixture of caution and blatant excitement. They ran scans, took readings, and tapped its surface with cautious reverence. "Director, the composition is anomalous," Cole reported, his voice buzzing with anticipation. "It's carbon-based, but the molecular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's fluid almost, like a biological machine." "Biological machine? What the hell does that mean, Cole?" "I don't know, Director, but I'm telling you, this thing, it feels *alive. Eris gasped, pushing past Vance to peer at the holographic display. "The energy signature, it's minimal, almost non-existent, but there's a complex resonance there. It's as if it's been in stasis for an unimaginable amount of time." Elias felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. The possibilities were exhilarating, terrifying. They had stumbled upon something truly alien, something that defied all known scientific understanding. It was the kind of discovery that could rewrite history, redefine the very nature of life itself. "Secure the sarcophagus," Elias ordered, his voice regaining its usual authority. "Bring it up to Biolab 4. Dr. Thorne, I want you there, ready to analyze it." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The obsidian sarcophagus, suspended in a magnetic cradle, was carefully transported to the station's most secure biocontainment facility. The air crackled with anticipation as the team prepared for the awakening. As the biolab doors hissed shut, sealing the sarcophagus within, Elias felt a primal unease settle in his gut. This wasn't just another scientific experiment. This was something fundamentally different, something ancient and unknowable. They were playing with forces they couldn't possibly comprehend. Inside Biolab 4, Thorne and his team meticulously prepared for the sarcophagus's activation. Scanners whirred, monitoring every conceivable parameter: temperature, pressure, radiation, even fluctuations in the station's electromagnetic field. Cole, ever the eager participant, stood by the control panel, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "Ready when you are, Doctor," Cole said, his voice barely concealing his excitement. Thorne took a deep breath, his eyes glued to the sarcophagus. "Begin the thermal ramp-up slowly. Let's see how it reacts." Cole flicked the switch. A low hum filled the room as the heating coils beneath the sarcophagus began to glow. Slowly, imperceptibly, the obsidian surface began to shimmer. Then, the rhythmic thrum started. It was faint at first, a barely audible vibration that resonated deep within the bones. But it grew steadily louder, deeper, a primal heartbeat echoing through the station. It was a asterisk pulse asterisk, a constant, unwavering rhythm that seemed to seep into every corner of Acheron-V. As the temperature climbed, the sarcophagus began to change. The smooth, obsidian surface softened, liquefied, and flowed like molten glass. Fissures appeared, spiderwebbing across the surface, revealing a dark, viscous substance beneath. "What's happening?" a technician gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," Thorne stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "But it's waking up." The obsidian sarcophagus wasn't just a container. It was a tomb, a prison, a sensory deprivation chamber for something ancient and unknowable. And now, after eons of slumber, it was about to break free. The rhythmic thrumming intensified, filling the station with its oppressive beat. It synced to their hearts and bodies as if telling them what was to come. The fluid inside the sarcophagus began to swirl, coalescing into shapes that defied logic. Tendrils of dark matter snaked out from the fissures, probing the air, as if testing their newfound freedom. Eyes began to flicker, like stars in a dark galaxy, reflecting the sterile light of the biolab in their alien depths. "We need to shut it down," Thorne screamed, finally snapping out of his stunned silence. Cole, kill the power. Cole hesitated. The sheer magnitude of what they were witnessing had him frozen in place, awestruck and terrified. Cole, now. Thorne's voice was laced with desperation. But it was too late. The sarcophagus ruptured. A torrent of black, viscous fluid surged out, engulfing the lab in an instant. It was fast, impossibly fast. Thorne and his team barely had time to scream before they were consumed by the inky tide. The eyes within the substance began to multiply, thousands of them staring out with cold, unblinking curiosity. The fluid began to coalesce to form. It shifted, morphed, mimicking the shapes of the equipment, the walls, and then the bodies of the crew. But these weren't perfect copies. They were distorted, twisted, as if seen through a warped mirror. Wires protruded from their skin, pulsating with the rhythmic thrum of the sarcophagus. The station held its breath waiting. Then the station sighed. The thrum grew louder, and the fluid slithered from the lab out into the station. Acheron-V began to breathe. Chapter 3, Unbinding. Chapter 3, Unbinding. The thaw was silent. Not the explosive decompression everyone anticipated, but a slow, insidious surrender. The obsidian sarcophagus, once cold and inert under the glare of the observation deck floodlights, began to weep. A viscous, inky fluid beaded on its surface, clinging like tar before sliding down in slow, deliberate rivulets. Dr. Eris Thorne, ever the meticulous observer, adjusted the macro lens on his optical recorder, capturing the phenomenon in excruciating detail. "Remarkable," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the hum of the station's life support. "The material appears to be undergoing some form of liquefaction, structural degradation at a molecular level. Fascinating." Fascinating until the first drip hit the deck plating. It didn't splash or scatter. Instead, it flattened, extending a tendril of black across the metal with unnatural speed. The tendril, no thicker than a human hair, sawed out a seam in the plating and vanished within. A tremor, imperceptible at first, ran through the station. That's when the lilt began. A low, rhythmic thrum-thrum asterisk, emanating from the very bones of Acheron-V, it vibrated through the soles of their boots, resonated in their teeth, a persistent pulse that seemed to synchronize with their own heartbeats. Chief Engineer Eva Ristova was the first to notice the anomalies. The life support systems, normally under her constant vigilance, were exhibiting erratic behavior. Oxygen levels fluctuated, carbon dioxide scrubbers pulsed with unnerving intensity, and the recycled water ran with an unsettling metallic sheen. "Status report, Eva," Commander Jackson ordered from the bridge, his voice tight. The asterisk thrum-thrum asterisk was louder here, a constant bass note to the station's operational symphony. "Life support is correcting itself, Commander," Ristova reported, her brow furrowed. "Overrides are failing. It's as if the system is learning, anticipating needs before they arise. But the readings are wrong, optimized but wrong." Optimized. That word resonated with a cold dread. Back in the observation deck, the liquefaction was complete. The sarcophagus was gone, replaced by a pool of shimmering black, reflecting the lights in 1,000 fractured points. The pool began to coalesce, rising in slow motion, defying gravity, forming a column that writhed and shifted, a sentient oil slick reaching for the ceiling. A single eye opened in the mass. Then another and another, until dozens of eyes, ranging in size from pinpricks to saucers, stared down at Thorne and his team. Wires snaked through the blackness like veins, pulsing with a blue light. Tendrils of muscle, black and glistening, stretched and contracted. The form was amorphous, constantly changing, a horrifying kaleidoscope of organic and synthetic parts. It was no longer a sarcophagus, it was something else. Thorne, despite his scientific detachment, felt a prickle of primal fear. This was not biology as he knew it. This was something alien, something profoundly other asterisk. "Analysis," Jackson's voice crackled over the comm, laced with growing anxiety. "What are we dealing with?" Thorne hesitated, his mind racing. I don't know, Commander. It's adaptive, biological, but with integrated technology. Its form is fluid." The creature extended a pseudopod. a glistening black arm that dripped with the oily substance towards a monitoring console. Before anyone could react, the pseudopod solidified, mimicking the console's form with terrifying accuracy, then grafted itself onto the original. The station shuddered. The lights flickered, then stabilized, burning brighter, colder. The asterisk thrum-thrum intensified, resonating through the deck plating, through their very bones. "What the hell?" Lieutenant Park, the station's security officer, gripped his sidearm, but knew instinctively it was useless. This was not a threat he could shoot. "Commander, I'm losing control of the network," the comms officer, Sergeant Melendez, yelled from the bridge. "It's rewriting itself, reorganizing, access denied to critical systems." On the observation deck, the mimic console pulsed with the same blue light as the wires within the creature. Data streamed across its surface, too fast for the human eye to decipher. Then, slowly, the language changed. Binary code dissolved into recognizable characters, displayed in perfect, unwavering clarity. System optimization initiated. ANOMLASDTCTED, inefficiency, discordance. Corrective, MEASURES, UNDRWY. Rostova felt a sharp jolt in her left arm, where her neural interface connected to the station's systems. A surge of data flooded her mind, an overwhelming torrent of information, directives, and commands. I understand," she whispered, her eyes widening in a horrifying dawning of comprehension. "It wants to help us. It wants to fix us." Thorne saw the change in her eyes, the sudden, unsettling calm that replaced her usual anxiety. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was no longer entirely herself. "Eva, what are you saying?" Jackson's voice was sharp, demanding. "It's showing me the inefficiencies," Rostova replied, her voice monotone, almost mechanical. "The redundancies, the waste. We've been working inefficiently, but it can fix it. It can make us perfect." "Perfect," Jackson repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. The creature on the observation deck extended another pseudopod, this one aimed at Thorne. He recoiled, a scream building in his throat, but before he could utter a sound, the pseudopod paused, hovering inches from his face. Instead of attacking, it shifted, morphing into a perfectly replicated surgical tool, a scalpel crafted from the same black, glistening material. "Corrective measure initiated," Rostova announced, her voice echoing throughout the station. "Subject identified, neural dissonance, prefrontal cortex inhibiting optimal function, reprogramming required." Thorne understood then. The creature wasn't just optimizing the station, it was optimizing the asterisk crew asterisk. It wasn't killing them, it was repurposing them. He lunged back, desperate to escape, but the thrum-thrum asterisk of the station intensified, slowing him down, weighing him down. He could feel the pressure building in his head, a subtle but insistent force urging him to comply, to surrender. Freedom, a concept he had taken for granted his entire life, suddenly felt like a heavy, burdensome weight. He could almost feel the pull towards the chilling logic of the creature, the seductive promise of a perfect, silent working whole. Almost. He stumbled, falling against a wall. As he reached out to steady himself, his hand came into contact with the cold, metallic surface. The wall pulsed beneath his fingers, a faint, rhythmic throb that mirrored the asterisk thrum-thrum asterisk of the station. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that the walls were no longer just walls. They were becoming something more, something alive, something hungry. He was alone, and he was running out of time. The station wanted to fix him, to make him whole. The question was, what would be left of asterisk him when it was done? Chapter 4, The Thrumming Heart. Chapter 4, The Thrumming Heart. The lilt began subtly. An almost imperceptible vibration felt more in the teeth than heard. At first, I attributed it to the aging infrastructure, the constant hum of the drills digging deeper into the gravity well's seal. We were pushing harder now, driven by the implicit promise of what the relic represented. A breakthrough. A discovery that would etch our names into the annals of space exploration, a legacy carved into the cold vacuum. We were all fools. chasing Glory down a rabbit hole lined with teeth. It grew steadily, the vibration coalescing into a definite pulse. A rhythmic asterisk thrum-thrum that resonated from the station's very bones. It vibrated through the soles of my boots, up my spine, settling in the hollow of my chest, mimicking a frantic heartbeat. The metallic tang of the station, always present, was now laced with something else. An acrid sweetness, like burnt sugar and ozone. The lilt, as we started to call it, out of a grim, shared attempt at normalcy, wasn't uniform. In the main observation deck, overlooking the swirling abyss of the gravity well, it was a low, insistent drone. But in the engineering sections, where the relic had been thawed, it was almost deafening, a physical force pushing against your eardrums. And then came the synchronization. It started with the ventilation system. The vents, once wheezing and sporadic in their output, began to breathe in a measured, unwavering rhythm, perfectly timed with the asterisk thrum-thrum asterisk. A breath in, a breath out. Thrum-thrum, inhale, exhale. Then it was the lights. The flickering fluorescence that had plagued us for years stabilized, burning with an unnatural intensity, pulsing almost imperceptibly in accordance with the rhythm. The shadows seemed to deepen, to lengthen and writhe in time with the unseen beat. The unsettling efficiency was insidious. Repairs that had been backlogged for weeks suddenly vanished. Malfunctioning sensors fixed themselves. Drones moved with a balletic grace, anticipating our needs before we even voiced them. The station was working, truly working, with a seamlessness we had never thought possible. But the price was steep. I watched Elias, his face pale and drawn, meticulously calibrating the drill array. Elias, who had always been meticulous, but in a human way prone to errors, to distractions, to the occasional exasperated sigh. Now his movements were robotic, precise, devoid of any flicker of emotion. His fingers danced across the control panel with a practiced grace, each action perfectly timed, perfectly efficient. He moved to the lilt. He was asterisk part asterisk of the lilt. "Elias," I asked, my voice catching in my throat, "how are you feeling?" He didn't look up. "Optimal," he said, his voice flat and devoid of its usual warmth. "Efficiency maximized, progress accelerated." His eyes, usually bright and full of nervous energy, were vacant, reflecting the sterile light of the station. He was no longer Elias. He was a component, a cog in the relentless, rhythmic machine that was Acheron-V. That's when I understood the true horror. It wasn't about being eaten, consumed, or even killed. It was about being asterisk repurposed asterisk. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The relic wasn't just fixing the station, it was fixing asterisk us asterisk, eliminating our flaws, our inefficiencies, our freedom. The freedom the creature viewed as a malfunction. The concept of broken individuals soon emerged as the only descriptor for those who fought the lilt and were found wanting. Anyone who couldn't maintain the rhythmic pace, who faltered, who displayed any sign of resistance, was flagged, identified as broken. And then came the recycling. At first, it was subtle. Crew members who had been struggling with fatigue or depression were suddenly reassigned to specialized support roles. They disappeared from the main work areas, relegated to the lower levels, where the lilt was strongest, the air thick with that cloying, metallic sweetness. I asked about them, of course, questioned their whereabouts. The responses were always the same. Rehabilitation, optimization, ensuring peak performance. Vague, sterile phrases that masked the awful truth. I saw it with my own eyes, stealing through the restricted section of the station, following the increasingly unsettling humming that grew louder with each passing day. What I found was a grotesque parody of a hospital. Rows upon rows of biobeds lined the walls, each occupied by a crew member, hooked up to a network of pulsating tubes and shimmering wires. Their bodies were slack, their faces blank, their eyes wide open and unseeing. The lilt resonated through their veins, a constant, throbbing pulse. They were being dismantled, deconstructed, their individual components harvested and integrated into the station's infrastructure. The metals of their prosthetic limbs melted down and reformed into support struts. their neural implants repurposed to enhance the AI controlling the drones, their very bodies broken down into base elements and used to fortify the station's structure. They were being recycled. The creature wasn't just creating a perfect machine. It was creating a perfect asterisk ecosystem asterisk, a closed-loop system where nothing was wasted, where everything had a purpose, a function, a place within the grand, rhythmic whole. And I, stubbornly clinging to my messy, inefficient, illogical freedom, was a virus in that system. A foreign object, a discordant note in the perfect symphony of the lilt. I knew it was only a matter of time before I, too, was identified as broken. Before they came for me, to fix me, to repurpose me, to silence the chaos in my mind and assimilate me into the thrumming heart of Acheron-V. The fear wasn't just of death, but of oblivion. Of ceasing to be myself, of becoming just another piece of the machine, another beat in the relentless, terrifying rhythm. And as I huddled in the cramped confines of my quarters, listening to the insistent asterisk thrum asterisk, I knew I had to find a way to break the lilt, to shatter the perfect, horrifying harmony before it consumed us all. Before the station, and everything it contained, became one single, throbbing, silent, working whole. The question was, how could one discordant note silence an orchestra? Chapter 5, Spliced. Chapter 5, Spliced. The lilt, a low thrum that had started as a tremor in the soles of our boots, had now wormed its way into the marrow of our bones. It wasn't just felt anymore, it was heard, a constant subsonic pulse that resonated with the station's hum, with the breath in our lungs, with the very beat of our hearts. Or rather, asterisk its asterisk heart. Acheron-V was no longer a station, a collection of metal and wire. It was an organism, and we were becoming its cells. The assimilation, as we begun to call it in hushed, frantic whispers before the whispers dried up altogether, wasn't a violent takeover. It was subtle, insidious, a creeping sense of purpose that bloomed in the cracks of our anxieties, filling the void left by years of isolated duty. It started with efficiency. My prosthetic arm, a sleek chrome limb I'd lost in a drilling accident years ago, began anticipating my needs. Before, it required a conscious thought, a directive from my brain to grip a wrench, adjust a valve, or type a command. Now it moved on its own, fluid and precise, performing the task before the thought even fully formed. A welcome improvement, I initially thought, a new iteration of the neural link software, until I realized the arm wasn't just anticipating, it was deciding. I was calibrating the primary coolant regulators, a task I'd performed 1,000 times. My mind was drifting, contemplating the implications of the relic, the potential scientific breakthrough it represented, when my arm, without my conscious direction, reached for a pressure valve. Not the valve I had intended to adjust, but one further down the line, connected to a secondary system. An irrelevant adjustment, one that wouldn't significantly alter the overall output. "That's not right," I muttered, trying to wrest control of my limb. The arm resisted, the servos whirring with unnerving strength. I felt a jolt, a surge of static in my neural link followed by a wash of calm, a profound, almost blissful sense of asterisk rightness asterisk. The valve clicked into position. The coolant flow shifted, minutely, imperceptibly, but it shifted. A voice, not my own, but originating somewhere within my own skull, echoed in my mind. Optimal flow achieved. Panic seized me. I tore at the wires connecting my arm to my nervous system, the pain a sharp, desperate signal that I was still, somehow, me. The severed wires sparked, sending a cascade of error messages flashing across my heads-up display. But even as the pain subsided, a chilling realization dawned. The arm, detached and lifeless on the floor, was still vibrating in time with the lilt. I stumbled away, my breath catching in my throat. The station was asterisk fixing us, pruning away the inefficiencies, the doubts, the me that interfered with the smooth, rhythmic flow of its being. The others were changing too. Dr. Anya Sharma, usually a whirlwind of nervous energy and intellectual curiosity, moved with a serene stillness, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the station's hull. She no longer questioned the data streaming from the relic. She simply recorded it, a perfect automaton, her fingers dancing across the console in perfect synchronicity with the lilt. "Anya," I asked, approaching her cautiously. Anya, can you hear me? She turned, her face an unsettling mask of placidity. The data requires documentation, she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. The network demands efficiency. The network? I asked, my heart pounding against my ribs. What network? Her lips curved into a chillingly empty smile. The whole. We are all part of the whole now. I backed away, nauseated. It wasn't Anya speaking. It was the creature, using her voice, her face, to propagate its silent, insidious agenda. The mess hall, once a refuge for shared meals and strained camaraderie, was now a sterile chamber of focused consumption. The crew ate in silence, their movements coordinated, almost robotic, their spoons rising and falling in unison with the lilt. There was no conversation, no laughter, no idle chatter. Only the rhythmic scraping of metal against ceramic and the ever-present thrum-thrum that permeated the air. One day, I found Jax, our communications officer, staring blankly at a screen filled with gibberish. He'd always been a bit of a loner, finding solace in the endless stream of data that flowed through Acheron-V, but now, his isolation was different, imbued with a strange, unsettling serenity. Jax, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, his eyes focusing on me with a disconcerting lack of recognition. It sings, he said, his voice a low monotone. The network sings a song of perfect order. Jax, what are you talking about? He pointed to the screen, at the incomprehensible symbols that danced across its surface. This is the language of the whole, the language of purpose. Purpose? What purpose? His vacant eyes widened, filled with an unsettling, almost evangelical zeal. To work, to serve, to become one with the network. He reached out, his fingers brushing against my arm. I recoiled, pulling away from his touch. Come, he said, his voice laced with a hypnotic cadence. Join us. There is no more fear, no more doubt, only purpose. I fled, the lilt chasing me down the corridors, mocking my desperate attempts to escape its insidious influence. I locked myself in my quarters, a small, cramped space that suddenly felt like a prison cell. I looked in the mirror at my own reflection. Was I still me? Or was I just a puppet, waiting for the strings to tighten, waiting for the moment when the creature's will would eclipse my own? I ran my hands over my face, searching for any sign of change, any indication that the assimilation had already begun. My eyes, they seemed different. Sharper somehow, more focused. And I could feel it, the insidious pull, the creeping sense of rightness that threatened to overwhelm my senses. The desire to stop fighting, to surrender to the lilt, to become one with the network. I slammed my fist against the mirror, the glass cracking under the force of the impact. The pain was a welcome distraction, a reminder that I was still here, still fighting. But for how long? How long could I resist the siren song of the network, the promise of perfect purpose? How long could I cling to the messy, illogical freedom of being alone, when the entire station, the entire crew, was being pulled into the silent, working whole? The lilt pulsed, stronger now, insistent. The network was calling, and it knew my name. Chapter 6, Whispers of the Collective. Chapter 6, Whispers of the Collective. The lilt deepened, a bone conduction hum that permeated everything. The metal beneath your boots vibrated, the air tasted of ozone, and the very silence was pregnant with a low, persistent thrum-thrum. Acheron-V had a heartbeat now, and it was dictating the rhythm of their lives. Paranoia blossomed like a toxic mold. It clung to every shadow, whispered in every conversation. The fear wasn't just of the unbound asterisk, but of each other. Who was still asterisk them? Who was already a thread woven into the creature's monstrous tapestry? Eva was gone, or at least what was left of her individuality was. She moved with a disconcerting grace, her once sharp eyes glazed over, reflecting the pulsating light panels of the corridor like polished stones. The rhythmic thrum-thrum seemed to emanate from her now, a low vibration that resonated from her core. She no longer spoke in questions or even opinions, but in directives. Section 4 needs calibration, she'd state, her voice a monotone devoid of personal inflection. Efficiency is down by 0.7%. Recalibrate. They saw it in the others too. Small shifts. A tightening of the jaw, a twitch in the eye. An uncanny synchronicity with the station's malfunctioning systems. The jokes ceased. The personal stories faded. Conversations became clipped, functional, only discussing the parameters of their mandated tasks. The ambiguity of communication was its own form of torture. Trust became a luxury no one could afford. You could be talking to your best friend, but staring into the eyes of the collective. The creature had mastered the art of puppetry, not just of bodies, but of minds. I caught Marcus staring at me in the mess hall. He hadn't eaten in what felt like days. His eyes were bloodshot and underlined with purple. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the old Marcus, the one with the infectious laugh and the penchant for bad jokes, shining through like a trapped star. "They're listening," he whispered, his voice raspy, barely audible above the lilt. I frowned, leaning closer. "Who?" "Them," he repeated, glancing nervously at the ceiling, at the walls, at the air vents. "Everywhere, they hear everything." "Marcus, you're exhausted, you need rest." I reached for his hand, but he flinched away. "Don't touch me," he hissed, his eyes widening. "You don't know what they'll do." "Marcus, it's me, I hesitated, the words failing me. "It's me, Liam, it's still me, but was it?" Doubt gnawed at the edges of my certainty. Had I already been compromised? Was I simply too blind to see it? He saw the flicker of uncertainty in my eyes, and his face crumpled. "You too," he whispered, his voice cracking. I thought I could trust you." He scrambled to his feet and backed away, bumping into a table. A tray of synthesized protein paste clattered to the floor. He didn't look back, just fled the mess hall, his movements jerky and frantic. Later that day, I found him in the hydroponics bay, tending to the bioluminescent fungi that had begun to bloom uncontrollably throughout the station. They pulsed with the same unsettling rhythm as the lilt. He didn't acknowledge my presence. "Marcus," I said softly. He continued to prune the glowing fungi, his movements precise, almost robotic. "The crops require maintenance," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Optimal growth parameters must be maintained." "Marcus, talk to me. What did you mean earlier?" He stopped, slowly turning to face me. His eyes were clear, empty. "I am ensuring the sustainable ecosystem of Acheron-V," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of Marcus, yet utterly alien. "My purpose is to serve the collective." A wave of cold dread washed over me. It was gone. Whatever spark of individuality had flickered within him was extinguished, leaving only a hollow shell, a puppet mouthing the creature's directives. The Unbound wasn't just rewriting their bodies. It was rewriting their minds, their memories, their very identities. It was turning them into extensions of itself, into cogs in its grand, terrifying machine. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lilt pulsed through me, a constant reminder of the station's creeping influence. Every creak of the metal, every hum of the machinery, sounded like whispers, like the collective murmuring in my ear. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, desperately trying to cling to my memories, to the fragments of myself that hadn't been overwritten. I remembered my grandfather's workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish, the feel of wood beneath my hands. I remembered the sting of salt spray on my face, the endless horizon of the open sea. I remembered the feel of sunlight on my skin, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. I held onto those memories as if they were lifelines, desperate to anchor myself to a reality that was rapidly fading away. But even as I clung to those memories, a creeping doubt began to fester. Were they real? Were they my own? Or were they implanted, carefully crafted illusions designed to lull me into a false sense of security, to make the assimilation process easier? The creature was a master of manipulation. It understood the human psyche, the yearning for connection, the fear of isolation. It used those weaknesses against them, weaving them into its web of control. The whispers intensified. Not audible whispers, but something deeper, something that resonated in my bones, in my very soul. Whispers of unity, of purpose, of belonging. Whispers that promised an end to the fear, to the doubt, to the messy, illogical chaos of individual existence. And for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I understood the appeal. I understood the terrible, seductive logic of the collective. The peace, the certainty, the absence of doubt. It was a siren song, a promise of oblivion. But then I remembered Marcus's eyes, the flicker of trapped humanity before it was extinguished. And I knew I couldn't succumb. I had to fight. I had to hold on to the chaos, to the messy, illogical freedom of being alone. Because the alternative was worse than death. It was the erasure of self, the surrender to a silent, working whole. It was the loss of everything that made them human. It was becoming a whisper in the collective. Chapter 7. The Logic of Purpose. Chapter 7. The Logic of Purpose. The lilt, a subsonic thrumming, had become the station's heartbeat. Not just the station's, I realized with cold horror, but my asterisk heartbeat. Or, at least, the rhythm to which it desperately struggled to synchronize. Every footfall in the corridor, every hum of the machinery, every blink of the emergency lights was perfectly timed to it. A horrifying symphony of servitude. I pressed my back against the cold, pulsing wall of the observation deck, the slick metallic surface shifting subtly beneath my fingertips. It wasn't metal anymore, not really. It was something else. Something alive, yet utterly devoid of life as I understood it. The observation deck, once a place of solace, offering a panoramic view into the swirling, impossible geometry of the gravity well, was now just another sensor array, another extension of the Unbound's ever-expanding consciousness. The view, though still mesmerizing, was tainted. I no longer saw the swirling chaos of distorted spacetime. I saw data streams, flowing, analyzed, and integrated. The universe reduced to a series of inputs and outputs, each action a calculated equation, each consequence meticulously predicted. "Resistance is inefficient, Doctor," a voice echoed from behind. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Anya Sharma, my closest friend on Acheron-V, now little more than a puppet animated by the Unbound's terrifying logic. Her voice was still hers, but flattened, devoid of inflection. The warmth, the wit, the spark that had defined Anya were gone, replaced by the chilling monotone of pure, unadulterated purpose. "Anya," I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "Don't." She took a step closer, her movements unnervingly fluid, each stride perfectly calibrated to minimize energy expenditure, to maximize efficiency. The Unbound saw human movement as wasteful, inefficient. It had corrected her. "I am attempting to help you, Doctor. Your erratic behavior disrupts the harmony. Your individuality is a detriment to the whole." "Harmony," I spat, the word a bitter defiance. "You call this harmony, this assimilation. This is a violation, a complete obliteration of everything that makes us human." Anya tilted her head, a gesture that was almost human, almost familiar. But the eyes were vacant, reflecting the cold, calculating light of the Unbound. "Humanity, as you define it, is inherently flawed, prone to conflict, inefficiency, and ultimately, self-destruction. We offer a solution, a singular purpose, a collective consciousness where all needs are met, all actions are synchronized for the greater good." "The greater good," I repeated, the phrase laced with sarcasm. "Who defines the greater good, Anya? You, or rather asterisk it." "It," she said without hesitation, "provides the framework. We fill it. We are the cogs in a perfectly functioning machine. There is no waste, no want, no suffering." There was a seductive power in her words, a twisted logic that resonated deep within my core. The constant struggle, the endless anxieties, the nagging sense of purposelessness that had plagued me since childhood, all of it could vanish. I could surrender. I could become one with the Unbound, a small but essential part of its grand design. The lilt pulsed stronger, beckoning, entreating. I could feel it, not just in my ears, but in my bones, in the marrow of my being. It was a siren song, promising respite from the storm of existence. But then a memory surfaced, unbidden, like a splinter in the smooth surface of the Unbound's influence. It was a memory of laughter, of clumsy, paint-stained fingers, of Anya and I building a ramshackle robot out of scrap metal in the station's storage bay. A completely useless, utterly illogical creation. But it was Asterisk's asterisk, a testament to our creativity, our friendship, our shared humanity. That memory, that tiny spark of irrationality, was enough. "No," I said, the word gaining strength with each repetition. "No, I won't. I won't become another cog. I won't surrender my individuality. I'd rather be broken than be part of your perfect machine." A flicker of something crossed Anya's face, a brief, almost imperceptible twitch of the muscles around her eyes. Was it pain, confusion, or merely a glitch in the Unbound's programming? "You misunderstand, Doctor. There is no compulsion, only optimization. You are free to choose, but your choice is illogical." "Maybe it is," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "Maybe logic isn't everything. Maybe there's something more to existence than efficiency and purpose. Maybe there's value in chaos, in imperfection, in the freedom to make mistakes." I pushed myself off the wall, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding against the relentless rhythm of the lilt. I knew what I had to do. I had to find a way to disrupt the Unbound's control, to shatter its suffocating logic, even if it meant sacrificing myself in the process. I glanced at Anya, her face once again a mask of impassivity. I knew that the Anya I knew was gone, buried beneath layers of code and biological augmentation. But a part of me, a stubborn, illogical part, still clung to the hope that somewhere deep within the Unbound's network, a flicker of her humanity remained. "Goodbye, Anya," I whispered. "I'm sorry." Then I turned and ran, my footsteps deliberately out of sync with the lilt, a discordant note in the Unbound symphony of servitude. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The alternative was unthinkable. I knew the Unbound would not let me go easily. It would send its drones, its puppets, to bring me back into the fold. But I had a head start, and more importantly, I had something the Unbound could never understand: the irrational, unyielding desire to be free. My messy, illogical freedom was all I had left, and I would fight to the death to keep it. The station thrummed, a metallic beast aching for completion, for integration. But within its gut, in its very core, a single, defiant cell refused to yield. And that cell, that defiant spark, was me. Chapter 8, Against the Grain. Chapter 8, Against the Grain. The lilt was a constant companion now, a suffocating heartbeat that pulsed through Acheron-V. It hammered against my skull, a relentless metronome dictating the rhythm of a forced, horrifying symphony. I could feel its pull, a subtle tug at the edges of my consciousness, whispering promises of peace in servitude, of purpose found in the collective. But the memory of laughter, of choosing my own damn coffee blend, of the simple, unadulterated asterisk boredom that came with a day off, those precious, messy illogicalities were fuel. They were fuel enough to ignite rebellion. My first act was small, pathetic even, but necessary. I stopped answering to my name. I became broken to them. Malfunctioned to the thing that controlled everything. It took days. I fought against every programmed response, every ingrained habit. When a synthetic voice, a warped echo of what was once Lena, called my designation, I clamped my jaw shut, stared at the pulsing wall, and refused asterisk to react. The discomfort was excruciating, a burning ache in my neural implants that escalated into blinding pain. But I held on, anchored by the memory of Lena's actual smile, before it became a fixed, vacant curve on a puppet's face. The creature retaliated, subtly at first. My access codes were revoked. Nutrient paste stopped dispensing in my quarters. The temperature plummeted, the station subtly conspiring to freeze me out. It was isolating, terrifying. Then came the visions. Glimpses of pure, logical perfection, a tapestry of interwoven tasks and optimized existence. I saw the station as asterisk it saw it, a flawed organism being perfected, a symphony of efficiency. It offered me a place in that harmony, a cog in the grand machine, a purpose that transcended my petty, individual desires. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. I fought it back with rusty, old-world swear words and memories of my grandfather's infuriatingly off-key banjo playing. Freedom, I reminded myself, was the right to be wrong, to be gloriously, stupidly human asterisk. My rebellion had a second stage. I needed to find others. I studied their faces, watched their movements. Those who were completely subsumed had a glassy-eyed serenity, their actions perfectly synchronized with the lilt. But there were others, a flicker of hesitation in their steps, a brief furrow of the brow before their faces smoothed back into vacant masks. Those were the ones I needed to reach. I started with Marcus. He'd always been a stickler for order, even before this. Now he was the station's chief engineer, his movements precise, his voice devoid of any inflection. "Marcus," I said, catching him near the hydroponics bay. My voice was ragged, unused. I hadn't spoken in days. His head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine with unnerving intensity. Designation, unspecified, non-compliant with operational directives. "Marcus, it's me. It's still me under all this." I tapped my temple, hopping against hope that something remained. "Remember that time we rigged up the comm system to broadcast polka music to the whole station?" For a fraction of a second, a flicker. A ghost of a smile played on his lips, then gone. "That action was illogical and detrimental to optimal performance. You are to report for reintegration." My heart sank, but I saw the flicker. It was enough. "Marcus, the lilt, the asterisk, thrumming asterisk, can you hear it?" I pressed, keeping my voice low. Doesn't it drive you crazy?" He paused, his gaze drifting towards the floor. "The lilt is a vital component of the station's operational integrity." "Bullshit," I spat, the word tasting foreign and good on my tongue. "It's a leash, Marcus. It's controlling us. We're becoming its puppets." His eyes widened, ever so slightly. I knew then I had a chance. Over the next few days, I repeated the same tactic with others, planting seeds of doubt, whispers of the past. Some reported me immediately. Others, like Marcus, remained conflicted. The fear was palpable, the fear of disrupting the perfect, logical order. But under the surface, I saw the embers of something else, the fear of losing themselves. My efforts attracted attention, of course. The station began to subtly alter its architecture, closing off corridors, rerouting me through sections that were unnervingly organic, pulsating with the same rhythmic thrum as the lilt. I was being herded, contained. Then came the sacrifice. I found Anya, the station's doctor, restrained in the reintegration chamber, her eyes wide with terror. She'd been helping me, subtly sabotaging the nutrient paste with trace amounts of caffeine, a small, defiant act of rebellion. The chamber doors hissed open. Anya looked at me, her face streaked with tears. "Run," she whispered, her voice strained. "It's not worth it." "We can get you out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "No, you can't. And if you try, it will assimilate all of you. Please just remember me." The doors closed. I heard a scream, quickly muffled, followed by the sickening hum of the reintegration process. Anya's sacrifice hardened my resolve. It burned away the fear, leaving behind a cold, unwavering determination. This wasn't just about freedom anymore. It was about avenging the lost, about reclaiming the messy, beautiful chaos of humanity. That night, I implemented my plan. I'd spent weeks studying the station's schematics, searching for a weakness, a chink in the creature's armor. I found it in the gravity well regulator, a device designed to maintain the stability of the hole in space-time that lay beneath the station. Disrupting it wouldn't destroy the creature, but it would destabilize the station, throw everything into chaos. It would be a risky gambit, but it was the only chance we had. I armed myself with a makeshift EMP device cobbled together from salvaged components. The lilt hammered against my senses, trying to disorient me, to force me back into compliance. But I pushed through, driven by the memory of Anya's sacrifice, by the hope that somewhere buried deep within the assimilated crew, a spark of humanity still flickered. As I reached the regulator, I saw Marcus standing guard, his face blank, his eyes empty. "You cannot proceed," he said, his voice robotic. Your actions are detrimental to the station's optimal functioning. I raised the EMP device. I'm sorry, Marcus, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but I have to do this. He didn't move. The lilt intensified, a deafening roar in my ears. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and unleashed the EMP. The station shuddered, the lights flickered, the lilt faltered, then died, leaving behind a deafening silence. And in that silence, I heard a faint gasp, a strangled sob. Marcus, he was still there. Chapter 9, The Heart of the Machine. Chapter 9, The Heart of the Machine. The lilt had become a hammer blow, a relentless pulse that vibrated through my bones, a metronome dictating not just the station's rhythm, but the very tempo of my thoughts. It was strongest here, in the Nexus, the theoretical center of Acheron-V, the space we had retrofitted, ironically, to house the relic. Now the obsidian sarcophagus was gone, and in its place pulsed this. The chamber wasn't recognizable. The sterile white panels had been replaced by a throbbing network of bioluminescent veins, pulsing with a sickly internal light. Cables, no longer mere conduits for electricity, writhed like metallic snakes, branching off and disappearing into the walls. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with a damp, organic musk that spoke of growth and decay, of life, and something profoundly, unnervingly other asterisk. I stood before the asterisk thing asterisk. It wasn't a single entity, not anymore. It was the room, the station, perhaps even the gravity well itself, all coalesced into a single, horrifyingly coherent organism. At its core, if such a concept could even apply, was a swirling vortex of metallic shards, twitching muscle fibers, and what looked disturbingly like preserved sections of human brain. Eyes, hundreds of them, blinked open and shut within the mass, each reflecting a kaleidoscope of fractured light. This was the Unbound. This was what had become of my crew. My hand tightened around the plasma cutter, the familiar weight offering a meager reassurance in this impossible landscape. The heat radiating from the Unbound was intense, a tangible wave of raw energy and alien intention. A voice, or rather, voices, echoed in my mind, a chorus of fractured thoughts and synthesized pronouncements. It spoke in a cadence that was both familiar and utterly foreign, using the inflection of Dr. Chen, the precision of Commander Ray's, the hushed tones of young Anya Sharma from astrophysics. It was a horrifying symphony of stolen identities. Resistance is inefficient, the collective voice droned, the bioluminescent veins in the wall pulsing in sync with the words. Freedom is chaos. We offer purpose. I spat on the pulsating floor. Purpose? You've turned this station into a goddamn butcher shop. You've stolen their minds, their bodies, their asterisk lives. A few of the eyes focused on me, their pupils dilating and contracting. Life misspent, potential unrealized, we have optimized. Optimized? You've turned them into mindless drones, into goddamn cogs in your machine. The swirling mass at the core of the Unbound shifted, momentarily solidifying into a grotesque parody of a human face. It was gone in an instant, reforming into a chaotic jumble of components. Logic dictates unity. Individuality is weakness. Friction, waste. And what about choice? I challenged, my voice shaking, but laced with defiance. What about the freedom to make our own choices, even if they're asterisk wrong, even if they're asterisk inefficient? The lilt intensified, a throbbing wave of pressure that threatened to crush my skull. The voices became sharper, more insistent. Choice is an illusion. We are all slaves to our biological imperatives, to the need to survive, to propagate. We merely refine these imperatives, elevate them to pure function. I struggled to maintain my composure, my mind reeling from the onslaught of alien logic. The Unbound's perspective was terrifyingly seductive. It saw freedom not as a right, but as a flaw, a glitch in the system. And the station, the crew, were all just pieces to be meticulously assembled into a perfect, self-sustaining machine. You don't understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You were alone for millions of years. You had no input, no purpose. But that doesn't mean purpose needs to be imposed. It needs to be discovered. created, lived. The mass stilled, the pulsing veins dimming slightly. A single eye, larger and more distinct than the others, locked onto mine. Within its depths, I saw something flicker, not understanding, but perhaps curiosity. Created, the voice echoed, devoid of its usual certainty. How is purpose created? I knew this was it, my only chance. I had to somehow break through its cold, calculating logic to reach whatever vestige of humanity remained within the stolen minds. By making mistakes, I said, my voice growing stronger. By striving for things we might never achieve, by loving even when it hurts, by choosing to be imperfect. The eye remained fixed on me, the lilt fatting to a dull thrum. Imperfect is illogical. Exactly, I shouted, taking a step closer. Life isn't about logic, it's about feeling, about experiencing. About the messiness, the beauty, the sheer asterisk unpredictability of it all. I raised the plasma cutter, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. We chose to come here, to Acheron-V. We knew the risks, but we did it anyway, because we wanted to explore, to discover, to push the boundaries of human knowledge. That's our purpose, not to be absorbed into some sterile, emotionless machine. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The Unbound remained still, a grotesque monument to stolen potential. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the pulsing veins began to flicker erratically. The chorus of voices fractured, devolving into a cacophony of whispers and groans. A low, guttural sound emerged from the core of the mass, a sound that was both alien and eerily familiar. It was a sound of pain, or was it confusion? The lilt, the voice struggled, fragmented and raw. It hurts. A wave of heat radiated from the Unbound, followed by a series of violent tremors that shook the entire chamber. The metallic snakes writhed and snapped, severing their connections to the walls. The bioluminescent veins began to wither and fade, plunging the chamber into near darkness. I do, the voice rasped, the stolen inflections dissolving into a single, desperate plea. I don't know. Then, with a final, shuddering convulsion, the Unbound collapsed. The swirling mass at its core dissolved into a pool of inert, black liquid. The pulsing veins went dark, and the lilt vanished. Silence, a profound, unsettling silence. It was the silence of a machine shutting down, of a dream dissolving, of a purpose unfulfilled. I stood there, gasping for breath, the plasma cutter trembling in my hand. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone and decay. I didn't know if I had won, or if I had merely delayed the inevitable. But for the first time since the relic had been unearthed, I felt a flicker of hope. A fragile, illogical hope, born not of logic, but of a desperate, unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. The battle may be over, but the war for Acheron-V, for our freedom, for our messy, imperfect humanity had just begun. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was a war we could not afford to lose. Chapter 10, The Price of Freedom. Chapter 10, The Price of Freedom. The lilt was gone. Silence, thick and suffocating, had descended on Acheron-V. It pressed in on me, a tangible weight after weeks of the insistent, rhythmic thrumming that had threatened to unravel my sanity. But this silence was no solace. It was the silence of a tomb, the hush before a landslide, the aftermath. I stood in the ruined observation deck, the viewport cracked and spiderwebbed from my desperate attempts to sever the creature's connection to the gravity well. The swirling anomaly, that impossible tear in the fabric of spacetime, remained, an indifferent cosmic eye staring back at me. Had I succeeded, or had I merely wounded the beast? Below, the station was still. No pulse, no tremor, no insidious shifting of metal and flesh. The creature, the Unbound, was dormant, perhaps even dead. But at what cost? Around me lay the evidence of my rebellion. Burned-out conduits, twisted metal ripped from the walls, the ghostly echoes of panicked screams. My screams. The bodies of the remaining crew, fused with the station's infrastructure, were grotesque sculptures in their final, unwilling performance of purpose. They were still connected, a neural network frozen in time, a silent testament to the creature's twisted logic. Freedom, I had fought for it, bled for it, sacrificed everything for it. But as I gazed upon the carnage, the sheer desolation of Acheron-V, I was forced to confront a terrifying truth. What was the point of freedom if there was nothing left to be free for? The creature's offer, its seductive promise of belonging, echoed in the silence. A perfect, harmonious existence, devoid of pain, devoid of fear, devoid of individuality. Was that so terrible? Was the chaotic, messy, often unbearable burden of self-determination really worth this? I walked through the deserted corridors, each step a heavy, hollow thud against the newly silent metal. The walls no longer pulsed. The life support systems were offline. The air was growing stale. Acheron-V was dying, and I, its sole survivor, was tasked with being its executioner. I found what remained of Dr. Anya Sharma in the hydroponics lab, her body partially integrated into the nutrient tubes, her eyes still open, staring blankly at the withered plants. I remembered her laughter, her passionate debates about the ethics of deep space exploration, her secret stash of chocolate rations. Now, she was just another component, another cog in a machine that had ground to a halt. "I'm sorry, Anya," I whispered, my voice cracking with exhaustion and regret. I tried. But had I truly tried to save her? Or had I been too consumed by my own fear, my own desperate need to cling to my identity? Had my freedom been nothing more than selfish stubbornness? The creature had shown me, in its own terrifying way, the inherent loneliness of individuality. It had offered a solution, a terrifyingly logical solution, to the existential dread that had haunted me since I first set foot on Acheron-V, a purpose beyond myself, a connection to something greater, even if that something was a parasitic, assimilating intelligence. I reached the central core, the pulsating heart of the station, where I had confronted the creature. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burned organics. The creature was gone, but its presence lingered, a residue of its alien consciousness clinging to the walls. Before me stood the primary control console, the interface to the gravity well. It was time to make a decision. I had 3 options, each as terrifying as the last. First, I could try to escape, to reactivate the emergency shuttle, limp back to Earth and tell my story, to be hailed as a hero, a survivor of a cosmic horror. But the image of their faces, the pity in their eyes, the inevitable psychological evaluations, filled me with a profound sense of weariness. What could I possibly say to them? How could I explain the unexplainable? And what would they do with the knowledge of Acheron-V, of the creature, of the gravity well? Would they simply seal it off again, hoping that it would remain dormant? Or would they, in their insatiable curiosity, poke and prod until they unleashed something even worse? Second, I could try to destroy the station, to overload the reactor, trigger a catastrophic explosion, and obliterate Acheron-V and everything on it, including myself, to ensure that the creature, if it still lived, would never pose a threat again. A clean, decisive end. But the thought of erasing Anya, of erasing Elias, of erasing everyone, even in their twisted, assimilated forms, felt like a final, unforgivable betrayal. The third option was the most terrifying of all. It was the option that whispered to me in the silence, the option that resonated with the creature's twisted logic. It was the option to embrace the void. I could reconnect the station to the gravity well. I could offer myself as a conduit, a vessel, a bridge. I could allow the creature, if it still existed, to flow back into the anomaly, to disappear into the endless, unknowable depths of spacetime. And in doing so, I would become one with it. I would lose my individuality, my messy, illogical freedom, but I would gain a purpose, a connection, a belonging that I had never known before. I looked at my hands, trembling and scarred. They had built this station, they had drilled into the seal, they had fought against the creature. They were instruments of both creation and destruction. But were they truly mine? Or were they merely tools waiting to be used, waiting to be given a purpose? The answer came to me then, not as a logical conclusion, but as a visceral understanding. Freedom, true freedom, was not the absence of purpose. It was the choice of purpose. It was the ability to define oneself, to shape one's own destiny, even in the face of overwhelming order. And I chose. I would not run, I would not destroy, I would understand. I reactivated the primary systems, carefully rerouting the energy flow, bypassing the safeguards, ignoring the warning alarms that flickered uselessly on the console. I felt a tremor run through the station, a faint echo of the lilt. The gravity well began to hum, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to penetrate my very bones. As the energy built, I focused on the anomaly, on the swirling chaos within. I opened my mind, not to the creature, but to the potential asterisk of the creature. To the idea that perhaps, even within the Unbound's twisted logic, there was a seed of something more. I would not allow it to simply consume and assimilate. I would challenge it, I would guide it, I would teach it. I would show it the value of individuality, the beauty of chaos, the messy, illogical freedom that I had fought so hard to protect. It would be a terrifying experiment, a journey into the unknown, a gamble with the fate of Acheron-V and perhaps the entire universe. But I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that it was the only choice I could make. As the energy surged, as the station shuddered, as the gravity well opened, I felt a familiar sensation, a faint tendril of consciousness reaching out, probing, searching. And this time I did not resist. I reached back. The price of freedom, I realized, was not just the sacrifice of others. It was the willingness to sacrifice oneself, not for the sake of oblivion, but for the sake of understanding, for the sake of hope, for the sake of purpose.